Welcome to the Gridiron Expert. I'm Connor Hibbett. Next up on our team previews, we're going to be looking at the Miami Hurricanes. And joining us on the channel today is David Lake. David, welcome to the show.
Hey Connor, glad to be on with you. Appreciate you having me. It's always fun to talk about an upcoming season. And yeah, if you want to follow more of my work, check out InsideTheU.com.
Gotcha. Well, again, we appreciate you being on the channel today. And if you want to go ahead and tell our subscribers where all they can find all your content.
Yeah, InsideTheU.com. So that's 24/7 sports site. We have a YouTube channel as well, Inside the U, and then have a podcast. Through the Smoke is the name of the podcast. But really, just InsideTheU.com. You can find it all there too.
Gotcha. Well, looking at the Miami Hurricanes for the 2025 season, we'll start at the quarterback position. Obviously, they got Georgia transfer coming in, Carson Beck. What is the expectation for Carson Beck, and do we assume he's going to be fully healthy?
So far, his recovery is on track to this point. Still not there yet in terms of like 100% throwing a football. I think that's expected to be maybe mid to late July. But he is expected to be a full go for the start of fall camp in August. And yeah, I mean, expectations are high. He was very productive during his 2 seasons as a starter at Georgia. And I think it's fair to say at Miami, he's probably going to be playing it in more of a pass-friendly type of offense with the air raid system that Shannon Dawson runs with the Hurricanes. And frankly, I think it's fair to say that playing against the ACC schedule probably not as daunting as the week after week SEC grind that he played against while at Georgia. So I expect him to be highly productive. I expect him at Georgia, he was about what? I think he was 3,300 yards one year, 3,700 yards another year. I think a fair expectation is right around 3,500 yards for the season for Carson Beck if he's fully healthy and plays in all the games. And I think he can lead one of the better offenses in the conference.
And speaking of the passing game, the targets he's going to be throwing it to in the receiving department. So the top four guys in terms of production from last year depart. I
hmm
know Miami hit the portal hard for receivers. They got C.J. Daniels. They got the guy from BYU here recently. What is, do you think the receiver room has an opportunity to be as good as what it was last year, or do you think it's a step back and they're just trying to plug the holes?
Just being fair, I think it is going to be a step back. I think in general, the offense will probably be more balanced. I do think they'll probably lean more on the run than they did last year. I think last year after the month of spring football, they kind of realized they had something special in Cam Ward. And so they definitely leaned into that, just kind of letting him be the playmaker that he is and improviser that he is. Carson Beck's a good quarterback, but he's not that type of quarterback. So I think they want to be more balanced, a lot of play action, deep shots off that running game. But in terms of the receiving talent this year, you're right. They hit the portal hard. They wanted some proven commodities, and they brought in C.J. Daniels from LSU, about a 500-yard guy there. BYU receiver Keelan Marion, kind of an interesting player, kind of like a Swiss Army knife. I don't know if he's like the most polished receiver at this point, but he's a fast guy. You can use him a lot on jet sweeps. He's a good kick returner. They get about 350 yards last year at BYU. They brought in Tony Johnson as a slot receiver from Cincinnati, about a 400 to 500 yard receiver last year for
I think he was a leading
Cincinnati.
receiver too, right?
Yeah, 600 or sorry, 606 touchdowns, which led them to. So production out of the slot. And then, what they're really hoping for too is rising sophomore JoJo Trader to take that next step. He was top 100 recruit coming out of high school, talented guy in high school, the teammate of Jeremiah Smith. And, I think there's an expectation that he takes a big step forward. To me, like just in terms of talent, he's the wide receiver one of the group. Now, will he go out and produce like that? That's the big question. If he does, I think Miami's offense has a chance to be very, very good. If he doesn't, and if he's just kind of another guy, I think it'll be a good, solid offense.
And for our viewers, Miami actually had the top offense in college football last year in a lot of metrics, including total yards per game, averaging more than 530 per outing. So you discussed that the offense this fall might lean more on the run game. and that
Mhm.
starts up front in the offensive line. And correct me if I'm wrong here, Miami might have a top five offensive line in college football, maybe top three.
I think so. I think that's fair. I think that's the expectation internally by Miami. I still think while that is true, I think it's fair to say that a lot of that group still has to take a step forward. Like the talent and the potential of the group is really high, but they haven't necessarily maximized that potential yet because they're still on that trajectory of improvement and whatnot. But you return Francis Maui Noah, who was a five-star recruit coming out. He's in his third year now, so he's expected to kind of take that leap. He's been a good, solid 2 year starter. On the left tackle spot, it's Markel Bell, who was kind of a spot starter last year for Jalen Rivers when he was dealing with his injury stuff. And Markel's just on a crazy upward trajectory. He came in last year as a JUCO player. No one really expected him to play much or be ready to play much. But he is physically talented at 6'9", 340 pounds,
Yeah.
crazy long wingspan. And his technique has just really improved since his arrival last year. And he's expected to be maybe a top 3 round pick, maybe a first round pick if it all comes together and the technique matches the traits. Then at the guard spot, Inez Cooper, 4 year starter. Left guard spot, Matthew McCoy was a starter last year, did a solid job. Has to take a step still forward, but he's got a lot of talent. And then James Brockermeyer, they brought in from TCU, is a 1 year starter there at TCU, and he's kind of that veteran guy has 1 more year of eligibility, and he's kind of leading it off from a vocal standpoint at the center spot. So it's going to be it's the strength of the team on paper. And I think it's the best in the ACC, the best offensive line in the ACC. We'll see what that means nationally, but it is a good group.
And the depth looks pretty good as well. I mean, Ryan Rodriguez, do you think
Mhm.
he's going to get a lot of playing time?
So left guard is probably a battle. I would project Matthew McCoy to win that job, but last year Ryan Rodriguez began the year as the starter there in the Florida game. He got hurt in the Florida game. That's why Matthew McCoy was the starter there the rest of the year.
Gotcha.
But Matthew McCoy probably has a higher ceiling. Ryan Rodriguez is a valuable depth guy that can fill in a lot of spots, though.
Yeah, so like we're kind of hinting towards here, this has a chance to be a very, very good offensive line. We got to get a sky cam view of the Notre Dame and Miami
Yeah.
game because the line of scrimmage battle is going to be really good there.
Yeah, I mean, that's where you win, right? If you have national championship or even just conference championship aspirations, you got to be good at that line of scrimmage spot. Really, like Notre Dame's probably the only team on Miami's schedule that can really give Miami a run for, okay, who has the better offensive line? It's a
Mhm.
debate in that game, right? So, the rest of the schedule, I think Miami probably has the edge against Florida and then everyone else in the ACC that they will play against in the regular season. So, it's going to be a fun matchup, that game one matchup.
Absolutely. When you look at the difference between the teams that can win conference championships, like you mentioned, and win national championships, and then the teams that are breaking through, winning 8, 9, 10 games, maybe for like the first time in years, whatever it might be, the difference is at the line of scrimmage, and the
Mm.
depth of every position group. That's really the biggest difference with the elite teams and then the very good teams. Looking at the running back room, I guess there's belief in the in-house players here with Mark Fletcher, Jordan Lyle. Do you think this group might be one of the best in the ACC?
I think those are your top two. I still think, to be fair, they both those guys got to take a step forward. Mark Fletcher, this is his first year as the guy. He's kind of been that complimentary running back during his first 2 years, but I think there's a lot of confidence that he can be a productive player. I think Jordan Lyle he's a rising sophomore. He's entering his second year. He flashed a lot as a true freshman running back last year. He had 400 yards on minimal carries. He had an impressive yards per carry average. He just has to show that he can handle a bigger workload. But he's probably the most gifted running back in terms of physical traits that Miami has. And then they solidified their RB3 because, as you know, if you want to have a long season that includes a long postseason run, you probably need at least 3 running
Oh
backs to
yeah.
do that. So they wanted to go out and solidify that in the spring portal. They brought in Shamar Brown from North Dakota State as a transfer. He was 1,100 yards for the FCS national champions, and Jerry Rice Award winner as the top freshman at FCS. So they feel good about their top three. Are they like game breaker, home run hitter type of running backs? Probably not. But are they guys that can get you 10 yards consistently behind that talented offensive line? I think so.
I feel like you're talking about like the floor here and ceiling here of the running back room overall, and like whether or not like they're going to be like the biggest names you hear about. I feel like it's a similar running back room to Auburn because they're both Auburn and Miami running behind good offensive lines this year.
Mm.
Neither of them have like a star-studding like running back that you're going to be hearing about in the preseason or at PFF, but they still have quality guys that they can count on like their top two or three guys. I feel like it's kind of similar there.
I think maybe, and look, I think Mark Fletcher's a good back. I scenario for Miami is Jordan Lyle really takes that next step forward and is so good where you can't deny, like, yeah, he's RB1. And Mark Fletcher is like a quality complementary back that still is leaned on heavily, but you know you can give the ball to Jordan Lyle and he can produce explosive plays. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I think, first half of the season, it's probably Mark Fletcher's job, and they'll sprinkle in Jordan Lyle, but. I'm with you. I think, the offensive line will set the tone and provide some easy yards before contact for those guys. And it'll be a productive group.
And playing the ACC schedule, I'm curious to see if Miami ends up ranking number one or like top three-ish in offensive line yards. So
Hmm.
that'll be interesting to see. So given all the production that leads from last year's offense for the Hurricanes, I guess the bottom line is, and what a lot of people are going to want to know is, are there any concerns, questions, or do you think that it might look different, but it's still going to be a very efficient offense?
I think it will be efficient. I think it's fair to question how explosive will the receivers be. Um, tight end is something worth touching on here with Miami as well. So they lost Elijah Arroyo, who's probably the most explosive pass catching threat in the country at tight end last year. They're replacing him with an interesting player in Elijah Lofton, who's more of like an H-back body type, 6'1", 6'2", 235, 240, but he's very athletic, very good yards after catch guy, kind of like a running back when he catches the ball because he's hard to bring down, and he's athletic with his contested catch ability. So they're going to definitely try and scheme up some opportunities for him, and he might be kind of a big play threat. But to me, like that's where again the JoJo Trader thing becomes an interesting storyline because I think he is the receiver with the most explosive potential, um, but he hasn't really played much to this point. He played a little bit in the bowl game against Iowa State. He produced an explosive touchdown in that game, which is encouraging moving forward. But he's also been a guy that's kind of been snake bitten by some injuries during his time at Miami. So we'll see if it all comes together. I think it's going to be an efficient offense. Is it going to be, it's not going to be an explosive offense like it was last year, in my opinion. Can it be explosive enough? I think so. But to me, efficiency is probably going to be the mark of this offense this year.
And moving forward to the defense. So last season, coming into the year, it looked at each position group like the front six, front seven was going to be the strength. They had some questions in the secondary, but they were able, at least early on in the season, to really like stuff the running game. They got exposed a few times in the back end, and then at the end of the year, things just didn't finish off too well.
Yeah.
But it looks like up front that they'll be able to rush the passer this year at the very least.
Yeah, so they've made massive changes on the defensive side, and rightfully so, right? They had the number one offense in the country. That was a national championship offense,
Yeah.
and the team did not make it to the ACC championship game or the college football playoff field, right? And that's because of the poor performance of the defense, particularly in the second half of the season, once teams kind of got that tape on them and knew how to pick on them. But the main issues last year was, miscommunication on the back end. There was often times where the guys couldn't even get lined up correctly on a given snap. Anytime a team would throw a motion or a shift at Miami, it really messed up things on the back end for the Hurricanes. And then up front, as you're alluding to with getting after the quarterback, The feeling was maybe in that Lance Guidry system last year that there was too much twist games, stunt games up front. So Mario Cristobal brought in Corey Hetherman as the new defensive coordinator, who's kind of simplified the approach in general. And up front, that means just getting vertical, getting upfield, attacking the backfield rather than all these stunts and twist games that they were doing last year. And a big key too, quite frankly, is Ruben Bain getting back healthy because last year he sustained a hamstring injury in game one early against Florida and was never really right after that. He missed like 4 or 5 games after that, and then tried to give it a go in the second half of the season and work through it. But he wasn't the same player he was as a true freshman. So he's worked hard on his conditioning this offseason. He's lost some weight. He looks better physically too, just to the eye. And if he can get back to being even just the player he was as a true freshman, that's a big boost to Miami's pass rush. They also return Akeem Mesidor, who's been a productive veteran player now. You kind of know what you're getting there. And then D tackle, they're excited about former 5-star recruit Justin Scott taking that next step, being a starter this year. David Blay, they brought in from Louisiana Tech as a 4-star transfer. And Ahmad Moten is a guy they're excited about as well at D tackle. He's a returning guy, about 300 kind of snap guy last year, and he's going to have a bigger role this year. And then they got some young defensive ends they're excited about rolling through too. Former 5-star Armando Blunt, former 5-star Marquise Lightfoot. So they feel like the talent's there. They feel like the scheme is there to just kind of let them show their athleticism and ability. And, it should be more of an attacking style up front this year, which I think the players are excited about too.
And the experience, at least for the
Yeah.
starting lineup, is there with Mesidor and
Yeah.
with, like you said, Justin Scott taking that next step this year. And if Ruben Bain's healthy, if Bain is at his ceiling this season, do you think
Yeah.
this could be one of the best defensive lines in the country?
Um, I don't know
Or
about that. I think it will be a good ACC defensive line. But just talking about Ruben Bain, I think if Bain is at his best, he's probably a first round pick after this season. So he's got a lot on the line in terms of going out and producing at a high level this year. And he can be a game breaker, right? We saw it as a true freshman.
yeah.
And but I think the potential's there. I think it's a little early to say that because you're still depending on a lot of young players who need to actually show it in games. But the potential is there. The talent is there.
Going through a lot of these previews so far, the depth for most teams up front is not where they want it to be. And
Hmm.
when you look at Miami, like you said, there's some unknown, some inexperienced players. But I mean, the body
Yeah.
types and the athletes are definitely there. We'll just see if they hit their ceilings. And so compared to a lot of ACC teams, like Miami just has such a higher floor.
Yes. No, I agree. And to me, that all goes back to recruiting, right? High
Yeah.
school recruiting, the portal's great. The portal's fun because it's a lot of, in most cases, known commodities. You know what you're getting, plug and play. Starters or rotational players. But really, the teams that still compete at the highest level, it still boils down to high school recruiting. The
Yeah.
Ohio States, Alabamas, Georgias. And since Mario Cristobal's arrived in the ACC, they've signed the top class high school recruiting class in the ACC for the last 3 cycles. So this is year 4. You're supposed to now see it on the field in that way, and I think you will. I think you'll see that talent gap start to show between Miami and a lot of these ACC teams they're going to be playing this year. Um, yeah, I mean, the portal gets a lot of buzz, and fans, I think, care more about the portal now than high school recruiting. But at the end of the day, high school recruiting is still the most important factor in talent acquisition, in my opinion.
I agree with you. I think when you look at the national championship contending and most of the conference championship contending teams, especially at the top of the SEC, Big
Yeah,
Ten, a few of the top teams in the ACC, you're looking at teams that recruit high school players at an elite level. And yes, they get
and
some
retain
impact
them.
portal play. Well, I'm
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
and retain those players.
Exactly. It's
Yeah,
like, see, a lot of people are talking about the portal and buying guys. You might try to plug a hole at a certain position group, or like you need an immediate impact starter. You might get someone good through the portal for that. But when you look at the depth, and the
Yeah.
overall team talent, it's going to be coming through high school recruiting. And like you just said, like Ohio State, they paid with the rumor that it was a $20 million team. That
Right.
they didn't buy that team through the portal. They kept that talent to stay at Ohio State for another year, and now look at all the guys that they just had drafted. So yeah,
Yeah. 100%. It all matters. Everything matters in talent acquisition, right? But you want to be a team like you look at Georgia, you look at Alabama, you look at Oregon, you look at Ohio State. They're not ignoring the portal,
right,
but the portal they bring in, it's about 10 guys, right? All those teams bringing in about 10 guys, and more times than not, they're quality guys. They're just plugging in. Miami, frankly, is still at the point where they're trying to sign big portal classes because they have to, right? Like they're just now kind of getting um, over the top of year four of Mario Cristobal's high school recruiting. Um, so they're still bringing in a portal class that's like 18, 19 deep, which I think they would tell you, they don't want to do, but they have to do that for now till they start stacking the classes like they want at the high school level.
right. And so speaking of the transfer portal and Miami, they just brought in a guy from Rutgers,
Yeah.
Mohamed Toure. I know he's had some injuries here recently, but
Mhm.
if he's healthy, I guess that's still an unknown, or how long he can stay healthy, that's certainly an unknown. I'm guessing that because I know Miami was looking at getting a linebacker out of the portal.
Mhm.
Um, they return a lot of production. I know they lose their top guy from last year. How is the linebacker room looking for the Hurricanes?
Yeah, so Motore, if he's healthy and good to go, I think that's your starting middle linebacker. He the last season he played was 2023. Corey Hetherman, who's now Miami's defensive coordinator, was the Rutgers linebackers coach that season. So they're certainly familiar with each other. I think, when Torre said he was leaving Rutgers, he was, frankly, I think Greg Schiano told him, "Hey, go to Miami. That's the best spot for you because you know that system, you know that coach." And Miami has a need for middle linebackers, so it's kind of a perfect fit. Yeah, if he's healthy, he's kind of your thumper middle linebacker type that can also rush the passer on third down and some blitz packages. So I think that's a home run upgrade for Miami. They really needed that type of middle linebacker, especially when you look at like game one, you're playing Notre Dame, who's
Yeah.
going to run the ball down your throat with Jeremiah Love and that offensive line, breaking in a new quarterback. So they needed that veteran middle linebacker. I think they hit a home run as long as he's healthy, right? Um, so that's to me, that's the leader of that linebacker room right now. They returned Wesley Basaint, who was the starting weak side linebacker last year. He's going to be competing to keep that starting job with NC State linebacker transfer Kamal Bonner, who uh, Miami's excited about bringing him in. I guess, frankly, I don't know much about him to this point, but 6'2", 225 type of weak side linebacker that they say is very athletic, can bring some speed and length to that level of the linebacker room. And then the backup middle linebacker, probably Popo Aguirre, who was a backup last year for Miami, kind of rotational guy, dealt with some injuries, but they like him in that role too, that rotational role. So is it a strength of the team? Probably not. But has it improved, in my opinion, significantly during the spring portal window when you go out and add Torre and Bonner? I think so. I think Miami did some good work there in the spring portal window.
And speaking of getting players again through the portal, the secondary is going to feature a
Yeah.
lot of transfer players. So this was the biggest question for Miami last year entering the season. It ended up being probably the weakness of the team, which was,
Hmm.
a rather low bar to clear simply because there was a lot of talent at a lot of places last year and a lot of proven players, like you mentioned, that they got through the portal uh, last cycle.
Yep.
So what is do you think there's a lot of room for growth here with the players that they brought
Oh
in?
yeah.
Because a couple of them that stand out, like Xavier Lucas,
Hmm.
I believe from Wisconsin. Yeah, there's a lot, I guess, to be excited
I
about here.
think I think on paper the secondary is the strength of the team now. They've really flipped that room, I think, because you return OJ Frederic, who was a true freshman All-American last year at corner. Xavier Lucas, in my opinion, is a cornerback one all day. top 2 or 3 round NFL draft type of guy, 6'2", 200-pound corner, runs a sub 1100 meter. Impressed last year at Wisconsin as a rotational true freshman corner. So, and he was excellent during the month of spring football. So I think you got two really strong corners there, starting corners. They've just brought in a nickel, Keontae Scott from Houston.
Yeah.
Technically never played from Houston, but transferred from Auburn to Houston this offseason to be coached by Zach Etheridge, uh, who was at Houston. Miami hired Zach Etheridge this offseason, and now Scott's following him again to Miami. So he's a talented 6'1", 200-pound nickel. He was very good with Etheridge at Auburn as a nickel. Last year, Auburn kind of played him more on the outside, and he wasn't as effective. So he'll go back in the nickel here at Miami and be a key player for them. In terms of like rotational corners, they also have Ethan O'Connor, who they brought in from Washington State, kind of a 700 snap guy last year for the Cougars, 4 picks. So good backup corner there. Damari Brown, they were pleased with. He was injured last year for the most part. He sustained an injury in the Florida game. And but he's a talented guy, 6'1", 200-pound corner that they like a lot too long term. At safety, they went out and added Zechariah Poyser from Jacksonville State, one of the better safeties at the group of five level. He really impressed everyone with his play during the month of spring football because you do worry about players in general making that jump from group of five to power four. It was no issue for him. He looks the part body type wise and has the speed to play at this level too. So they're excited about him. And then during the spring portal window too, they added Jacoby Thomas, who from Tennessee, who is one of the better safeties available in the spring portal window. Miami was also in on AJ Halsey, who ended up going to LSU. He when he went to LSU, that they pivoted to Jacoby Thomas, who's 6'2", 200-pound corner from Tennessee. He was a rotational guy there. Will bring some physicality element to Miami. I don't know in terms of coverage, how much he brings in that way, but I think the physicality element they're excited about, and he's a 1,500 snap guy in his career, so a lot of experience. So, we talk about last year how communication, alignment were issues. All these guys, and it was a lot of inexperienced or new starters last year.
Yeah.
All these guys this year have played a lot of football, and they're more talented than the guys they had last year. So they've really flipped that room. And like I said, I think it's the strength of the defense on paper.
And do you think it could be the second best position group of the team after offensive line?
I would put it there. Yeah, I would.
That's a heck of a turnaround.
Yeah.
It's very noteworthy because I'm sure a lot of the preview magazines, a lot of the discussion with the Hurricanes for 2025 is going to be about the offense and what they lose. What is Carson Beck going to be, the
Mhm.
receiving core? They might talk about some of the really good offensive linemen that they have. And I'm sure there's going to be some questions. And if they talk about much about the defense, like, well, last year they did this and last year they did that. But like you said,
Yeah,
this
it's a
could
new
be,
group.
it goes from question like, uh-oh, what's going to happen here to we have a lot of confidence with this group. So that's what the portal can do in 1 year.
Yeah.
When you're a program like Miami, you can do things like this.
Yeah, and it's new DB coaches too. So they brought in Will Harris from Florida, Zach Etheridge, like I said, from Houston. So it's coaches that know what it's supposed to look like, guys that have had experience at the Power Four level, and they really wanted to flip that room, and it was mission accomplished. They devoted a lot of resources to doing it, and I don't think it's going to be an issue for Miami this year. I think linebacker, if you're going to pinpoint an area maybe where Miami's weak. But even those guys, like Motore, kind of solidifies that spot to me as long as he's healthy.
Right. I was gonna say if he's healthy, as long as yeah,
Yeah.
he's got to stay healthy there. Um, Special teams doesn't get a lot of discussion, but I do want to talk about. I know the punter returns. Um, so place kicker, they lose. Is it Borogalis? Is that how you pronounce it? So
Yeah.
he was an all-world kicker last year.
hmm
But I'm trying to remember. I think they got. Let me see here. Oh yeah, that's right. So
Bert Auburn.
oh, that's right. They got Auburn. Because I was gonna ask, do they have a lot of faith in the former three-star? Is it Abram Murray?
Yeah. So Abram hit the portal.
Okay.
Didn't have the best. showing in the month of spring football. So he hit the portal, and so they brought in or not Abram, they brought in Bert Auburn from Texas. So, he was a guy that, of course, everyone saw his struggles last year at the end of the year and got benched. But the year before, he was a good, solid college kicker. I think Miami's kind of banking on him returning to that form. And if he does, then Miami's going to be okay at kicker. He has done it before. I think he left Texas as their all-time leader in field goals
That's
made,
right. Yeah, I think
if I
so.
have that right. So, he's done it before. Kicker's certainly a mental position, and we'll see if he can find that form.
So obviously, there's going to be a very high floor for Miami this season, especially in terms of their record. What do you think the ceiling, though, is for the Hurricanes in 2025?
Yeah, I mean, realistically, I would say 11-1. I don't know if I feel confident saying 12-0, just because, you know, you got to be, in my opinion, to go 12-0, you got to be a program that knows how to do it week in, week out. And Miami just has not been that type of program for the past 20 years, like predating Mario Cristobal, right? So, to me, taking that type of leap would be too much to predict for me personally, but I could see the ceiling being 11-1. Would I predict 11-1? I would not. Um, but I think that's the ceiling. And yeah, I think the floor is pretty high. I think the floor is higher than last year's team. And last year's team, I felt like the floor was like 7 wins.
Yeah.
This year, I feel like it's maybe 8. So higher floor. I think just when you account for what last year's schedule was, um, you could say that team should have gone 12-0, could
Yeah.
have gone 12-0 maybe.
Right.
This year's schedule's tougher, so that's maybe why another reason why I wouldn't necessarily predict a 12-0 type of season. Um, but yeah, I think Vegas has it at 9.5 still
Yep.
for the over under win totals, and I think that's a perfectly fair number.
I think they opened up. You're right. They are at 9.5 right now across the marketplace. But I know like they opened up at 8.5 at some places, like minus 210
Yeah,
to the over, and then it quickly switched to 9.5. And I think last year didn't it close at 9.5 in
I think
August?
so. Yep, yep. It
Yeah.
was also 9.5 last year.
Yeah, so very interested to see how Carson Beck does the new look receiver room, and I'm also very interested against Notre Dame in the season opener how the defense looks because you mentioned it. That's a very very good running game that Notre Dame has. We talked about Miami potentially having a top five offensive line in college football, one of the best offensive lines in the entire nation. Notre Dame arguably has one of the
They
top
might be
running
number
back
one.
rooms,
Yeah.
yeah, in the entire country with the top running back. So yeah, that's going to be a very exciting battle against the linebacker room from Miami. They're going to get tested right out of the gates, and then the defensive line, the pass rush. It'll be a very exciting matchup.
Yeah, for me, just, again, this we're doing this in May, so it's, we still have a lot to learn about both teams.
Right.
Um, my impression right now, I think it's fair to say maybe Notre Dame has the better roster, if we're talking too deep. But I do think the quarterback situation is a big edge to Miami just from the standpoint of experience. And, I do think CJ Carr's talented, but he's going to be starting his first game against a legit team. And you never know what you got till the bullets start flying. So it's an interesting battle in that way, too, because, how much do they trust CJ Carr to go out and cut it loose? Or are they just going to lean heavily on the run game, which could still work too? So it's going to be a fascinating game.
It's a huge test for the Miami defense, and I think, yeah, you mentioned how much the secondary could improve this year. I would love nothing more than for the Miami defense to show itself and its strength and its ceiling in that very first game because I can totally see coming into the year the Miami defense is not getting the respect that they deserve with some of the improvements that they made, and they can make a name for themselves right out of the gate because again, all the talk with the Hurricanes is going to be on the offense and Carson Beck.
hmm No, I agree. I think, when Miami's good, their defense is good,
Yeah.
right? There's really no excuse for Miami, a school in the Southeast, particularly South Florida, to not have the type of athletes and impact players on defense. So, Last year was just it was tough to stomach at times and watch. Um, but this defense is much improved from a personnel standpoint. We'll see if the players take to the scheme, and it's in my opinion, it's going to be like when you look at the ACC, it's clearly Clemson and Miami, and I think they have the best rosters on paper, the best defenses on paper, the best offenses on paper. I think, this defense is going to be one of the better ones in the ACC.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure last year, cardiac canes a little bit with some of the
Oh yeah.
games and how they went.
Yeah, I mean, definitely won some games that were toss-ups.
Yeah.
Maybe should have lost, and but also that was just kind of the style they leaned into with Cam Ward, just leaning into letting him be who he is, and it worked out more times than not until the defense kind of let them down at the end.
And maybe they were just trying to increase their viewership on TV because it made it a
Exactly,
really exciting brand of football.
no
All right. Well,
doubt.
David, really good job today, and we appreciate your insight on the Hurricanes. One last time for our subscribers and our viewers, where they can find all your content.
Yeah, just check out InsideTheU.com. That's the website, and appreciate you for having me on. Happy to
Yes,
do
sir.
it anytime.